All right, good evening, everyone. Let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. It's 6 p.m. here. If you'll please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, that brings us to agenda item number 3, citizen comment period. There's no citizens signed up, so we'll keep moving on to item number 4. Business items 4A, approval of the minutes for August 20th, 2024 Water Commission regular meeting. Are there any comments for the minutes for last month's minutes? On my right? Nope. On the left? Anything you good? All right. So no comments on the minutes. Then can I get a motion?
I move to approve the minutes for the August 20th regular meeting as presented.
Second it.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve and a second there. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the minutes are approved. Moves us to 4B, discussion items, Utility Department monthly activity report. Stephen, please.
Good evening, Commissioners. For the month of August, we pumped 44.61 acre-feet from the Edwards Aquifer with a year-to-date total of 214.07, leaving 287.59 acre-feet available. As of today, the Edwards Aquifer dropped back down to Stage 3 restrictions because the J17 well level 10-day average rose above 630, and the Comal Springs flow was above 100 cubic feet per second. Currently, we are pumping an average of 1.31 acre-feet a day from the Edwards. We pumped 59.67 acre-feet from the Trinity Aquifer with a year-to-date total of 334.72. All required distribution samples passed. Water loss was at 1%. 247 work orders were completed. We placed one bad meter because the threads were leaking past. It's under warranty. Total portal customers, 852 for, 1,659 assigned meters. No main breaks reported. We also posted job openings on the Texas Rural Water Association job board for our two positions that we're going to have. 2252 well rehab will be completed this month. We have 2 days, Thursday and Friday of this week, we're going to do the tours of the well plants. And that's all I have to report for now.
Thanks, Stephen. Appreciate all of that. I think there's a couple things I wanted to point out there. One thing, and I think I brought this up at the council meeting also, but if you look at the unaccountable unsold for August there, sitting at 1%, which is significantly better than the national average there, and just testimony to the great job that all you are doing in the water department. Really appreciate it. Any questions on the right for Stephen? Anything on the left? All right. Easy crowd today. Also want to point out that meter readability, you've been hovering there above 99.5 for a few months. So I'm not sure what we changed and what we're doing on that, but good job. All right, so that brings us to item 4B, number 2, items applicable to the Water Commission discussed at the City Council meeting. So at the City Council meeting last month here, let's see here. First of all, looking at the stuff on the consent agenda, and I think we talked a little bit about this last month, but things to bring up. The expenditures looked good for the water department. I think we were at 81%. I forget where our revenue was, but it was significantly lower than last year. I think in the 60 to 70%. So, not a surprise, and we talked about that a little bit when we were talking about water rates last month, but it's right there in the consent agenda if you want to go down there. Oh, here it is. I do have my notes. The expenditures were also down, but revenue is down also for the year to date. Other things that were brought up here. Just some general stuff from the city to bring up, to amplify again for everybody. The trunk or treat is happening on Halloween, and Christmas lighting is the first Friday in December. So look forward to that. Oh, and there's a haunted house on October 1st, Friday. I know you wanted me to say that, right? Okay. Let's see here. The mayor did talk at the city council meeting about the drought. We were in stage 4 for a short period there, and he did not, no intent to increase the drought restrictions, and we talked about that. I think it was the mayor, myself, and the engineer spoke on the 2252 water line relocation. It is on hold. The contractor was demobilized, but the first step in starting that work up again has been completed, and he's working on several miscellaneous projects. I won't go through all those, but you can see those in the engineer report that were in there. Recommended the option for rate increase. There were some questions on what appropriate reserves might be, and that was covered by the, I think our finance person, I think, did she cover that adequately? I'm trying to remember my notes here. Council did approve option 4, our recommendation, and they reappointed all commissioners that were up there. And there was 4 of us that were up for reappointment last month. All right. I think that's everything from the city council meeting for my notes. Nancy, is there anything else you'd like to add on that? Okay. Mayor, good? Okay. Any questions on the right? On the left? All right. So that moves us on to 4B, number 3, Ordinance 61, Drought Management Plan. Commissioner Harshberger, would you like to take the floor on this one and discuss, or do you want me to just start rolling with it?
No, I'll give you a little context, and then by all means. And the first thing is, on this ordinance review, it is not driven by anything other than just periodically going back and looking at things. We have had a couple variance requests over the last year that applied to it, so it's just normal housekeeping. So there's no urgency to do anything or make a recommendation. These are just thoughts to go through and scrub it, and commission can discuss and do what they need to do. But the biggest things from my point of view in here to consider are just consistency. And going along with that is, it doesn't necessarily have to be stated in the ordinance, but what is the overarching goal? And for example, is our primary focus demand reduction, or is our primary focus pump recovery time? What is the main, and the normal variance process may not be sufficiently timely for people with drought-related issues, so perhaps there are some items that could be pre-approved for the city staff to award. I know Commissioner Stone had provided a description from SAWS about some of the things that they have regarding landscape. So the point being, we might want to look at something along those lines. And then the stage restrictions, just making sure that they're consistent going through, that they're not just a list of things, but they make sense why we add what we add. And then kind of miscellaneous related to the variances we have had, or just the idea, should there be a procedure for a new landscape if that becomes necessary, and is the pool permitting process actually feasible? So I think those are the big points, and you can read my voluminous thoughts on as you want, but they're just starters for discussion. They're not meant to be advocacy one way or another, just things that I noticed. So I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate that. Now, as Commissioner Harshberger brought up there, we're not trying to get recommendations yet. This is initial discussion here. We are going to keep working on this, so don't feel like you need to get everything out on the table tonight. But there are a few key things that I think were mentioned there, and some other things I want to bring up. This is an ordinance, so I think enforceability is a big part of this, and we don't want to write something that is overly restrictive to folks, and we don't want to try to write something that city officials would end up pulling their hair out trying to figure out how to enforce some of these things. So there's just some additional considerations there. I like what you said about consistency and overall goals on this. I think that's very important. And I'm going to monologue just for a little bit longer, then we'll go ahead and we'll go around the table here. But I like a lot of the things that you put on here. I know there's some open questions, and it's not all answers on here, but there's some really good ideas, and I like a lot of the suggestions that you have in here so far. I know there's some additional work that's going to need to be done, especially on the surcharges, the variances, and the pools were the three things that kind of jumped out at me that we really need to work with the city staff to figure out what is the best way forward on some of this stuff. All right. That's my opening salvo. That was probably way too long, but we'll go ahead and we'll just start over here on the left, and we'll just go through here and keep discussing. Commissioner Stone.
They said a lot of your comments was real valid, and once you start looking at the whole thing in full context, you realize there's not consistency in there. So yeah, I agree with a number of them. Some maybe need to be a little more defined, or some might be a little too far defined. But yeah, it's a really good start.
Yeah, so a couple of the same things pointed out to me, Jim. So the pools, I think, could be refined for sure, right? So giving an idea, like the two-step process, so the city has an idea of how many pools are coming that year, so they can stagger them out, so it's still water somewhere else, right? They might be tapping into the same place we are, right? So it's something to be considerate of. And the consistency, like I'm just looking through Appendix A of 61 right now, and if you look at stage 1 through 3, they all have 8 bullets. And the wording is different. It's the same message, but the wording is different, and there might be in a different order. So I agree. I think there should be some more consistency there just to make it extremely clear. But as far as like the other pieces of it, I'll just kind of rely on your expertise. I'm the new guy here. So I read through it all, and it makes sense to me, what you wrote.
Dr. Carmichael.
I can remember how to turn this thing on. Yeah, again, Jim, I want to laud you for your work effort in going through this again. And consistency is something. And I don't know if I'm too nitpicky or what. I do like definitions, and I looked at the definitions. And person in the definition is defined and then used 3 different ways in the ordinance. So it's a person who's an individual, but it's a company, some places, but the definition of person needs to be changed so that we identify an individual versus a company, or where is it? Individual, firm, entity, but then later supplier is any person who supplies, and then where do I find some others? User is a person, and then, but that's maybe a little nitpicky, but and your others, I did like a lot of your other comments, and I think they need to be explored, especially on pools and landscaping. I'm not as sympathetic, but that's my take.
Bill.
Yeah, again, Kevin, thanks for kickstarting this. It's always hard to do the initial writing. It's easy to pile on after that. I spent some time online looking at the ordinances of other cities. And a couple things I found. One is, I think what we do ought to try and align and be consistent with adjoining municipalities. We do hear that, comparing us endlessly to SAWS and things like that. So that in mind, sections 5 through 7 of the New Braunfels ordinance has a really nice punch table that puts a lot of the redundant wording right at the beginning, and then the real meat, which is the things you have to do when you get into the different stages, is in a table form. And after wading through it a little bit, it became quite clear. That was probably the best I saw. SAWS has some other stuff. I also came across a couple of organizations that members of Water Conservancy Advisory Board, the Save Water for Texas Coalition. I know a little less about that one, but these seem to be groups that are together looking at ideas that are in this whole vein of how do we, one of our goals being, how do we get things done? How do we live our life, fill pools, do landscaping, but conserve water? So there's a lot of people in this area thinking about this, and that was one of the things that I'd like to look into a little bit more. I think the idea of, before we wade real far into this, is really laying out what are the goals. I think you hit the main ones. The other is that, and I saw this in the New Braunfels one, is pushing tasks back to city management that are sort of pre-approved within certain guidelines. So things like variances for landscaping, timing of the year when things are done, become a little bit more mechanical rather than having to rise up through the whole approval process. Again, there's maybe some cues and ideas we can get other places. One of the things we struggle with is our tier rating appropriate? Is it motivating the right behavior? I personally would like to try and get a hold of some of the raw data that's out of the portal. We generally have observed less water being used over the last few years. Who's using less around here? Is it the low volume users? We were all blown away to find out that the average user in the city is 17,000 gallons or something. I would have guessed 30. So I'm really often where the data is. Looking at that data and crunching it may lead us to who's actually responding to the drought, who's responding to tiers, and it may give us some ideas on what structure would not demand right behavior, but encourage it. And might even allow for the use of a certain tier that would be structured like when you're filling your pool. I mean, maybe you're in a different tier for that one-time event at a particular time of the year. What it led me to is an enormously complicated process if we really wade into this. And I'm not real sure just how this would work, but it seems to me that it's appropriate for a kind of a workshop environment where we can sit down and cast ideas about, share things that we gather, people disperse to do different things over a period of time, and then come back with something that actually is actionable. So I don't know what criteria are required to commission something like this, but it sure feels to me like a workshop kind of activity with the commission and members of the city. So those are my comments. You created a monster.
Okay, let me address a few things on there. So
Yeah.
the tiers are actually in the ordinance 54, they're not in ordinance 61, so that'd be a double ordinance modification there.
Correct, yeah, absolutely.
The other one for the workshop, what we've done in the past, we broke this up into sort of a subcommittee and give it to a couple of people to work. If we have too many people working on it, then we get in the Open Meetings Act, and we can only do it during official meetings. So it's worked before in the past. That's how we updated Ordinance 54. Actually, as Commissioner Harshberger and myself spent a lot of time in writing ideas, throwing them at city staff, getting them thrown back at us, and a lot of back and forth with the city staff to finally get to something that was looked like a rewrite of the ordinance, and we brought that back to the whole commission. And it got kicked back again, and we redid it again a couple times, but you're right, it is a long process.
Well, I agree and had a lot of the same comments that have been stated already. And so, again, Kevin, thanks for kicking this off. And one of the things that kind of struck me as as I was going through this is that it is currently very Edwards-centric, the triggers, and I think that comment has been made, I don't know, maybe it was during the water rate discussions, that, you know, that's not our sole water source now. And the other thing that wasn't exactly clear to me is whether those triggers of the Edwards well levels were automatic for stage restrictions, or does mayor and council, that's one of the many factors that mayor and council consider in implementing those stage restrictions. So I think that's another point of clarification as we're looking through this, that, you know, is it well levels in the Edwards? Is it other, you know, are there 3 or 4 other factors that are considered, and those are just not automatic triggers when the wells hit a certain level? And then, of course, there's a lot of places where, as you mentioned, Dr. Carmichael, that definitions need to be refined or eliminated or new ones created throughout. And I think that's, you know, to ensure if you're using a term one place, it means the same thing another, and then that there's clarity in all that.
Did you want to take the comment on triggers, or do you remember the whole discussion from a couple of years ago?
Yeah, well, what I will say about it is, on the authority of the mayor to allow that to be done, so that the trigger points are there really for reference, and then the mayor and council make their decision. And it's currently authorized by the and/or language, which I think the city attorney at the time was okay with. But I would propose that we define the demand reduction measures in terms of the stages. We call those demand reduction measures. And then under the section 4, we talk about emergency water use restrictions and give the mayor and council the authority to implement the appropriate demand reduction stage, and just kind of separate those into 2 processes. And that would include an emergency, like an infrastructure problem or contamination of a well or whatever, that we had a sudden restriction, then the mayor doesn't have to wait for the next council meeting, right? He can just implement it, and then the next council meeting it can be discussed, something along those lines. And I think we can do that in section 3 and 4. So, I mean, that would be my thought there. And I have one, if we want to discuss it tonight, we can, but I guess what I would like to know, and the city staff, Mr. Steinmetz, you for sure have a role in this. The last time this came up for discussion is the watering hours. The most common variance we get is, can we adjust the watering hours? And I think they were somewhat written for the majority of our folks, which have automatic irrigation systems. So 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. is not a hassle. But my question would be, or proposal would be, if we kept the total number of hours the same, would it make sense for the staff to have the ability to approve a shift for those who have disabilities or whatever the case may be? So instead of 4 to 8, they can approve, 8 to 10, or, whatever the case may be, just keeping the hours the same. How would the commission feel about that? Because I definitely want some feedback on that before we try to write the next draft of this.
So we had this discussion with Stephen before, but you go ahead right now, Stephen, if you want to go ahead and talk about that. And it's about pump recovery times, I think, was the main thing there. Do you have all your notes from the last time you spoke on this one?
It's been a while. Yeah, before we were having some issues trying to keep up with filling up the tanks after pretty much all night of the sprinklers coming on. Pretty good compliance with everybody basically coming on about 4 o'clock in the morning and shutting off around 8 o'clock. It's been pretty good. They've been following the ordinance pretty well, as right now anyways. But before, it was just taking all day for some just to refill up. But yeah, that was one of the main things.
All right. Before we start talking about how we're going to keep going after this in the way ahead, I want to give the mayor and the city manager an opportunity if they wanted to add anything. Nancy first. Or maybe not. We can go to the mayor first. It's all good.
Oh, now I'm on. I agree that some aspects of Ordinance 61 need to be rewritten. It's been quite some time since that ordinance has really been fully addressed. Consistency, yes, would help with enforcement. And the number one thing is we need to make sure that whatever happens, whatever changes are made in Ordinance 61, that they are enforceable. And that's really all I have to add right now.
Thank you, Mayor.
I'm anxious to see what y'all come up with.
You have until March 25th, 22nd, sorry. It's been a minute since we implemented Stage 2. We've been in it fully now for 2 years to address the times. Thank you for reminding us all about the discussion of recharge times with Stephen, and that was the main issue of keeping it where it's at right now from starting at 4 o'clock. If memory serves, I had 3 or 4 get up and go water, and that was, I would say, based on what I've seen in my brief time as the mayor, forming a subcommittee. I'm not trying to nominate Kevin, but Kevin and, perhaps Nathan as a person that just new to the commission, that'd be a great time to look at a very new perspective, a very experienced perspective, and get together so we don't violate TOMA, right? And then come back to the commission with reading documents, and it's time, just like we've gone through Ordinance 54, it's definitely time to go through 61 and see what efficiencies we can come up with and clarifications, and I'm in full agreement. I think the most efficient thing to do would be to have a subcommittee, just as an opinion.
Thank you, sir. Stephen, do you have any concerns or anything you want to bring up to the commission before we keep moving here?
No, not at this time.
Thank you. All right. So, Mayor, I appreciate your very diplomatic way of saying the experienced person, not the older person leading this subcommittee. But is that something you'd be interested in there, Kevin? I know maybe
Do I
not
have a
interested.
choice?
Is that something you'd be willing to take on? Let me rephrase the
Well,
question.
I mean, it's been, because to be honest, we have a subcommittee and Commissioner Stone was on it. He's done some work as well, and it's been kind of difficult getting the time to get everybody together, but we can do more email or it could also be kind of split into 2 parts. If we could have somebody research the more specific questions, the pool or whatever. It doesn't necessarily have to be one subcommittee, but yes, I can continue working on it for now, and we can reallocate. I mean, I think it would be great to have some new eyes on this problem, because
I forgot that we are tasking out specific areas. Specifically, there's 3 or 4 big areas here. Is there any problem with tasking those out and having just those people report back to the subcommittee as they work on their own individual area?
I don't think there's a problem with a couple of subcommittees, but those subcommittees cannot communicate with each other. The only time they can communicate with each other is here in this public forum, in a public meeting. So that is my caution there.
Okay.
And
question.
I think too, perhaps the chair divide down or each group pick the points that they want to look into.
Going off of that, I have a question on meeting outside and working on this, right? So if we did some type of shared document where we could each work on it on our own time, does that conflict with the meeting's ruling, or how would that, something like that work? Does that make sense? Like, we just all had access to maybe a Google document online, and then we could kind of come in and comment as we would
No,
like and
it's
change
going to
things?
have to be just the subcommittee. It cannot be all the commissioners working on the same document.
Gotcha,
You have to firewall it less than a quorum.
gotcha, okay.
Did I say that right?
I'm sorry?
You have to basically firewall all the tasks, so it's less than a quorum working on
Yes.
whatever is out there.
Yes, we have to be very careful of that. Yes.
With that, then, I think we should just keep it as one until we can scope it a little further. And then if we come across, hey, this issue needs more detail, then we can come back next month and say, can we have a subcommittee for that? But I think right now it might be too much to try to figure out how to split it up.
Yeah, if you could, that would be a great thing if you can come back next month with some ideas on how other folks can get involved. It sounds like there's plenty of people here that want to help, but we want to make sure we follow all the rules. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
So do we keep Don, or do we switch the?
I'm interested in helping. Yeah, I have some ideas on the stage restrictions for sure, on the side of Conservancy.
Defer to the chair.
We can have 3 people on a subcommittee, right?
2.
Only 2, even though we
Only
have 7
2.
members?
I'm sorry?
Even
No,
with 7 members now?
3, only 2 on the subcommittee. That's all
Okay.
because 3 would actually make a potential quorum. So it has to be 2.
Okay. I mean, let's leave it as is while you and Don figure out how we can slice this baby up and then just keep working on it. Is that fair? Okay.
And I have a
Just
general
about to go
question.
around the room again. Go ahead.
Thank you. Because I'm kind of a rule nerd sometimes. Is there any way we'd have a group look at definitions through all the ordinances to make sure that there's no conflict? Because if we change some of the definitions for consistency in 61, does that have a ripple effect anywhere else? Just curious.
Yeah, whoever's working on that would have to absolutely check as a minimum with 54, and I think there's probably one other they'd have to check with.
Oh. The city secretary reminded me that if there's any discrepancies in definitions when we go in any of our ordinances, when we go through the codification process, which we are in the process of going through, the codification will align the definitions with each other where they're consistent throughout all the ordinances.
Is that something y'all do on a recurring basis, or does it happen every time you go through an ordinance?
What they're going to do is they're going to take all of our ordinances and make sure we don't have any conflicts.
Oh, so this is a new task that's
And
coming
then
up.
they put them into a code. It's an ongoing process. It is very timely. So I wouldn't be so quite concerned about, at this point, make definitions, say in ordinance 20. Yeah, or any other ordinances. Just worry about this particular ordinance and the definitions that apply to it at this point.
Nathan? Don? All right? Everybody's good? You sure you don't want the last word? Okay, so we're going to keep, the way we're going to move forward on this, we're going to keep, the current subcommittee is going to keep looking at it and look at basically workload and division of workload and make it a little bit more manageable. How's that sound? Good? All right. So if we can, we'll hold this on the agenda for next month also for some further discussion. All right, that brings us to this. That is just when we were talking about the water rates last month and everything. There's a lot of details that go into the water rate analysis that were out there. And there's been a lot of changeover on the commission since the commission has been pretty deep into this. So what we're looking for is just a little more information on how the process is being run inside of the city staff, and a little bit of education for us on the different parts that go into the water rate analysis and what gets the 5 options that eventually come to the commission. So just a little bit deeper dive on everything, just to help educate the members of the commission there. I know that this is the first time the city staff did this, was this last time, so I'm sure you're going through a hot wash and looking into this, but sometimes in the next few months, I think we would like to, I'll call it a water rate analysis deep dive on the process perhaps. I don't know, I'm sort of making things up while I have a microphone in front of me, which is never a good idea, but you're nodding, so I assume you know sort of where I'm going on this one.
I think I do.
Okay, well, let's see if anybody else has anything that they would also like to bring up about this. We'll go around. Am I missing the point on this one? And from,
You're talking about the calculation part of it? Like how they're
yes,
getting to?
how do we get to the 5 options?
Oh, okay, gotcha. Wasn't Jesse involved? Didn't he do a lot of those? Yeah, so we can get some of that from him.
Anything else from some of the newer members on that? Any of the older members on that? Oh, I see some people reaching for mics. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think in the course of the discussion there's a lot of history to this, and there's several models that have been created over time. And to understand those and not lose what was done, and then be, so that we can build on it, getting that understanding important too.
Yeah, I support that. I guess, you were asked to make a recommendation on a rate option and really trying to understand how those rates were derived, what the assumptions were. And so I think, any insight we can get to that would, I think, help us maybe do our job a little better as far as, either asking questions or just understanding or getting a little bit more comfortable with the process.
I think I've got as much deep dive as I want on that process. It's more, how are we translating it now with the city staff? Because I know in the past, we would brief it in 2 or 3 stages. And even then, it wasn't necessarily correct because the whole front end was missing, like the capital improvement program and where are we going? We just basically set rates to match the budget is what we've been doing. So to me, this agenda item has 2 parts. One, what do we want to do going forward? And then the second part is just explaining a little bit better what was done on this time around, so everyone has a little bit more confidence in the numbers. But having said that, just so you guys know, what was presented with what I know from having worked on it before, I was confident that it met the primary objective that we had to do. So I don't want anybody feeling like it was a insufficient process. It just maybe was not briefed at the level that new people need to hear. So there was a lot of, let's try to get up to speed really quickly to make a recommendation. But I think the process was done thoroughly. It's just different than we did it last time. So yeah, maybe a little more discussion is warranted, but that's my perspective.
All right, so Ms. Kane, what do you think? What do you think is a reasonable expectation to ask for just a little bit of an education session for us on the
We can arrange an education session. And this was our first year where we had done it in-house. And yes, we have had some changeover in the area that is responsible and will in the future be responsible for calculation, need to start a little bit earlier than what we did this year. And I think that right there would have helped the process and the understanding and an explanation of how we got to these places, give y'all time to ponder it and maybe come back and answer additional questions, refine some things, and make a decision from there. So we can work on that. I would not anticipate that, something like that happening until after the new year begins. Until after we get through audit and, because some of those
Yeah, of
figures
course.
are instrumental in that process as well.
All right, so we'll put a soft note down for January on that one, just so we can keep
Why don't
track.
we say February?
February?
Yeah,
Okay.
at the earliest.
Don't try to get it past March. I see what you're doing.
No. But, I mean, there's information that's in the audit that, updates some of our fund balance numbers, reserve numbers. Some of that information is coming from that source as well. So I think if we start trying to do it in November or December, all we're going to be doing is going through the steps, and you're not really going to understand where the information is coming from.
That's fair.
Is that?
Yep.
Okay.
Jim, can I jump in, throw my 2 cents exclamation point behind what everybody is saying? I really love what Kevin had said last month, that here we are raising rates to match the budget. You just said that again. You alluded to that last month. What we really need to do is in the water master plan, have set times that we plan in 5 years to raise the water rates this much to accommodate for inflation, the cost of water, and the budget going up. So really,
Now
I
you're just
think.
showing off and knowing what's next on the agenda. It's going to be a
Well,
good
so,
lead-in.
yeah, so it's a transition, right? But the water rate analysis process and the water master plan really need to be tied. So we have some tremendous expertise with this commission, specifically with Kevin in the last nearly 10 years of doing this, Stephen, Michelle, Nancy, Jesse. So we have a single point of success, but if we have turnover, we also have a single point of failure where we go, hey, how do we do the rate analysis process, and how do we get it to match the budget? So I just told Jesse last Thursday that, hey, you can't go anywhere because, you're the corporate knowledge. We need to incorporate that into the water master. A few of us collectively can do. It's that, hey, we can read it and go, all right, we know the plan, we know how this goes, and then still rely on our experts. So turnover is always something that gives me pause and caution as the mayor to go, we see that. So there's my 2 cents in my transition.
All right, that sounds good. I think we have a way forward. Does Stephen or anybody else want to bring up any more discussion on this item? Okay. So thank you, everybody, for those comments. And I think you brought up some excellent points, which I'll go ahead and close item 4 there and go straight into item 5, which is the water master plan. And this goes into also the discussion that we had last month, as you absolutely pointed out there about, I think there's a 5-year look that, I'm saying 5, I don't know what the right number is, but I think there's a long-term look that we need to look at that is going to feed into the rate analysis and capital improvements and all of those things as we move forward. And I know there's at least a couple members, I'm sure, up here on the commission that would love to work with staff to sort of bounce ideas off of and just sort of see where things are going and to provide any assistance that's necessary in any of these areas. So along with that, I don't know if that's if we should encourage that, or if that's desired at this time. Ms. Kane, what do you think? Where are we at that on the water master plan? How can the commission help or be involved and sort of work with the staff on this?
And we discovered it really wasn't as updated as it really needed to be. So we sent it back to the city engineers. City engineer started working on it. I think he met with you a few times, Stephen. Well, and he has subsequently left the firm that is our city engineer, so we have a new city engineer. I spoke with him last week, and I stressed to him how important it completed, and that he needed to meet with Stephen, he needed to discuss, and he needed to look at the needs of the city's water system. At this point, I think it might be a little bit premature to incorporate anyone from the Water Commission in the process. Let Stephen and I meet with him further. And then once we perhaps get the document back and get it into the review aspect, that may be the point in time, sure then, that we feel that it's adequately covering our system.
Thank you. Where things are going on this. We just keep checking in with you every month and just sort of
Okay.
check on the progress. Is that
At the appropriate time, be involved with that review and process, and how do we then dovetail that into the budgeting process?
Well, the Water Master Plan is predominantly going to be supported by impact fees and capital improvement projects where we would have to go out for debt for. So, in most instances. So it does have an impact on us, a big financial impact, but
So 2 times to do the water master plan, you're predominantly going to get a distribution system review where they're going to look at the minimum pressures, the maximum pressures, fire code, the size of the pipe, what's the future growth forecast and all that kind of stuff. What we need to encourage them to do, and it would come from the water department's interaction with them, is to include the other side of that, the production and storage component as well. And they probably will not evaluate the maintenance requirements, like, the routine, how often do we have to do the bolted tank reconditioning and things like that, without asking them to do it, because it's not something you go out and just do, right? The normal thing is the distribution system, and that's what they did last time. It was almost entirely distribution system, because what they're trying to figure out is what capital improvement needs does the city have going forward. So just got to make sure that we incorporate all that for it to do any good. And the second comment, and Stephen, I think you had a copy of it, and I don't know if it's available electronically or not, but the American Water Works Association actually has a small booklet on rate setting for small systems. So it might be a good thing to see if we could get either another copy or if it is in fact available online. City is a member, right? So I think we should maybe look at that, because while we don't follow that process exactly, at least gives you a place to start.
You also reminded me, there's some university study that talked about the same thing, that went through a lot of details on this also. Bill, anything? Any other comments on the left? All right. Good with the way forward, Ms. King? All right. So we'll leave that on there, and we will continue tracking there, and we've got at least one volunteer already for and on this one, so we're at number 1I, receive recommendations, consideration of appointment for water commission before. That would, any commissioner that would like to be the chair, and they would like to go ahead and volunteer, now is the time. Any volunteers on the right?
Yes. Discussions and
Thanks, Bill. Anybody on the left interested in Water Commission Chair? All right. So the first thing we have there, we need a, done by the Water Commission. This does not need to go anywhere, and you can't make a motion for yourself. So,
I will. I move that of October 2020.
second. Any discussion on the left? Discussion on the right? Okay. What I will say, thank you, Bill, stepping up. Appreciate it there. I think that you're going to do a great job. All right. So let's take it to a vote. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? All right, so we have a new water commissioner effective October 2024. So are there any volunteers for vice chair on the right? I did tell Bill that I would stick around as vice chair, but if there's somebody else that wants to do it, I am happy to take any volunteers.
What does
Yeah.
it entail? What are the responsibilities we're talking about here?
So, good question.
Not familiar.
The chair obviously runs the meetings and interfaces with the council and presents any recommendations to the city council and attends the city council meetings. And the vice chair does does the chair duties when the chair can't. So you're in?
Sure, I'll volunteer.
So Nathan is a volunteer for vice chair. Any other volunteers? So we have one volunteer.
That we appoint Nathan Dorsey as the Vice Chair of the Water Commission effective October 2024 through appreciation for volunteering. And thank you.
Well said. We have a motion, we have a second?
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the left? On the right? All in favor, say aye. All right. So we have the appointment of Nathan Dorsey as the vice chair for a one-year term and the appointment of the water chair, Bill Pohl, for a one-year term. And that was 4C1I. That brings us to 4D, future agenda items. Any future agenda items on the right? None. On the left, this is just for subjects for future agenda items. All right. No future agenda items, so we'll go ahead and close that one. And that brings us to item number 5, citizen comment period. You don't have to be signed up for this comment period. Just go ahead and step forward. No takers. All right, that brings us to item 6, adjournment. So I'll go ahead and call this meeting adjourned at 6:58 PM. Thank you very much, everyone.